Have you ever felt the presence of something immense in the silence? That moment when the world quiets down, when the noise of life fades into the background and you're left with nothing but your own thoughts. Most people run from it. They drown it out with distractions. Social media, endless conversations, mindless entertainment. Anything to avoid being alone. Because being alone forces you to confront something most fear, yourself. But what if I told you that solitude is not a curse, but a gift? A force so powerful that those who understand it gain an advantage over the rest of the world? The great Stoic philosophers knew this secret. They embraced solitude, not as loneliness, but as a path to self-mastery, strength, and wisdom. Seneca once said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." Think about that. The greatest retreat is not found in distant lands or hidden sanctuaries, but within your own mind. Yet few ever dare to enter. Most men will spend their entire lives surrounded by people, by noise, by distractions. They will never know what it means to be truly alone. And because of this, they will never know themselves. But you are not most men. You are here because you seek wisdom. You sense that there is power in solitude, and you are right. Today, we uncover 6 profound benefits of being alone. 6 truths that, once understood, will forever change the way you see solitude. By the end of this video, you will not only understand the power of being alone, you will embrace it. Prepare yourself. This journey begins now. Make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't yet. Every like, subscribe helps us continue our mission of sharing knowledge, and leave a comment below and share your opinion on these benefits, or tell me which one resonates with you the most. Ready to unlock more wisdom? Let's get started. Benefit 1. The mind becomes your ally, not your enemy. There is a war inside every man. A silent battle waged between the self that seeks greatness and the self that fears it. For most, this battle is lost before it even begins. Not because they are weak, but because they have never faced themselves in the solitude of their own minds. In the presence of others, the mind is constantly occupied. It reacts, it adjusts, it seeks approval. But when you are alone, the noise fades. The external distractions disappear. And for the first time, you hear something that has always been there, but was drowned out. The voice of your own mind. Most people fear this moment. Because in solitude, the mind reveals its true nature. It shows you who you really are. It reminds you of your flaws, your regrets, your unfulfilled desires. The thoughts you push away during the day, the ones you ignore with endless distractions, rise to the surface like a tide that cannot be stopped. This is why so many resist being alone. Not because solitude is painful, but because the truth is. But here's the secret. Those who endure this discomfort, who face the storm of their own thoughts without running, emerge stronger than the rest. They do not fear their own mind, they command it. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors, understood this deeply. In his private meditations, he wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Think about that. How many men live their lives as slaves to their own thoughts? They seek validation from others. They fear criticism. They are pulled in 1,000 directions by emotions they do not understand. But the man who embraces solitude learns something they never will: how to master himself. Solitude forces you to listen to the endless chatter of your mind. At first, it will be unbearable. The mind will resist. It will distract you with memories, with worries, with thoughts that seem urgent, but are nothing more than echoes of the past or illusions of the future. But if you persist, something incredible happens. The noise begins to settle. The storm within you calms. And in that stillness, you discover something rare: clarity. You begin to see your thoughts for what they really are. Not commands, not truths, but simply thoughts. Some are useful, most are not. Some serve you, others hold you back. But you are not your thoughts. You are the observer of them. This is the power of solitude. It forces you to confront your mind, to separate what is real from what is illusion, and ultimately, to take control. Once you master this, the world changes. Anxiety loses its grip. Fear becomes something you understand, not something that controls you. Decisions become clearer, actions become deliberate. This is why history's greatest thinkers, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, even the Buddha, spent long periods in solitude. They understood that without silence, without space to think deeply, the mind remains a battlefield. But for the man who embraces being alone, the mind ceases to be an enemy. It becomes an ally, a weapon, a source of immense strength. Most men will never experience this. They will avoid solitude, distract themselves, and wonder why they feel lost, anxious, or restless. But you are different. The next time you find yourself alone, resist the urge to escape into distractions. Sit with your thoughts, observe them, do not run. Because on the other side of solitude lies mastery, and the man who masters his mind masters his life. Benefit 2. Solitude awakens your true identity. There is a version of you that exists beneath the surface, a version unshaped by the opinions of others, untouched by expectations, unchained from the illusions of society. This version of you is not the one you present to the world, not the one molded by family, friends, or culture. It is something deeper, something raw, something real. But most men will never meet this version of themselves. Why? Because they are never alone long enough to hear its voice. From the moment a man is born, he is told who he is. Society places a name on him, a role, a set of expectations. Be this, do that, act this way. He learns to conform, to blend in, to shape himself based on the reflections of others. His personality becomes a collection of borrowed traits. His desires are not truly his own, and his beliefs are secondhand, inherited from a world that has no idea who he really is. But solitude strips all of that away. When you are alone, there's no one to impress, no one to agree with, no one to please. The masks you wear in public fall away, and what remains is something most men never dare to confront, their true self. Nietzsche once wrote, "Become who you are." A simple statement, yet one of the hardest things a man can do. Because to become who you are, you must first discover who you are, and discovery requires solitude. When you step away from the noise of the world, when you remove yourself from the opinions, the trends, the endless comparisons, something strange happens. You start to hear your own voice again. What do you truly want? What do you truly believe? What path is yours alone to walk? At first, these questions will be difficult, because for so long your identity has been built on external forces. The music you like, the clothes you wear, the way you speak, even the way you think. How much of it is truly yours? How much of it has been shaped by others? Most men never ask these questions. They drift through life carrying a personality they never consciously chose. And when they feel lost, when something inside them whispers that something isn't right, they silence it with distractions. But you are here because you seek something deeper. And solitude is the key. Think of the great minds throughout history: Leonardo da Vinci, Nikola Tesla, Marcus Aurelius. These were not men constantly surrounded by others. They spent long hours, even years, in solitude. Not because they were antisocial, not because they were lonely, but because they understood something few ever grasp. To create something great, whether it be a masterpiece, an invention, or even yourself, you must first separate yourself from the world. Solitude is where the greatest realizations are born. It is where a man stops being a reflection of others and becomes an individual. But this is not easy, because when you begin this journey, when you remove yourself from the noise, you will feel resistance. You will question yourself. You will feel lost. You may even feel an urge to return to the comfort of distractions. This is normal. It is the mind's way of resisting transformation. But if you persist, something incredible happens. You begin to see what truly matters to you. Not what society tells you to value, not what others expect, but what resonates in the depths of your soul. Your passions become clearer. Your values solidify. You no longer chase validation, because you realize the only opinion that truly matters is your own. And this is the greatest freedom a man can achieve, to know himself so deeply that nothing external can shake him. The man who has spent time alone, the man who has faced himself in silence, is unbreakable. He does not shift with the winds of public opinion. He does not seek approval. He is not easily manipulated, because he has met himself in the depths of solitude and emerged whole. But the man who fears being alone, he will always be a prisoner of the world. This is why solitude is not loneliness. It is a path to strength, a path to truth, a path to becoming the man you were always meant to be. So the next time you find yourself alone, do not see it as emptiness. See it as an opportunity. Because in that space, away from the noise, your true identity waits to be discovered. And the man who truly knows himself is unstoppable. Benefit 3. Solitude sharpens your mind into a weapon. The mind of the average man is dull, scattered, and easily distracted. It jumps from one thought to another, consumed by trivial concerns, unable to focus for more than a few moments before seeking the next distraction. It is not a weapon. It is a broken tool, barely functional, constantly clouded by the noise of the world. But the man who embraces solitude does not have an ordinary mind. He understands that just as a blade must be sharpened against stone, the mind must be honed in silence. He does not allow his focus to be stolen by the endless distractions that enslave the weak. He withdraws, not in isolation, but in purpose. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happens. His mind becomes sharp, precise, dangerous. Throughout history, the most powerful thinkers, strategists, and philosophers have understood that solitude is the forge where a great mind is built. Blaise Pascal once wrote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." Think about that. Why is it so hard for most men to be alone? Because in solitude there is nothing to consume, nothing to numb the restless mind. The average man cannot handle this. His attention span has been shattered. He is addicted to constant input, incapable of deep thought, incapable of true focus. But the man who steps into solitude, who embraces it, who sits with it, begins to rebuild what modern life has destroyed, his ability to think. At first, the silence will feel heavy. The mind, so used to external stimulation, will resist. It will crave distraction. But if he persists, something profound happens. His thoughts begin to slow, and in that space, true intelligence is born. When a man is alone, away from the noise, his brain enters a different state. Studies in neuroscience have shown that solitude enhances deep thinking, allowing ideas to form in ways they never could in a distracted mind. The greatest writers, scientists, and warriors throughout history understood this. They sought solitude not to escape the world, but to see it more clearly. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, ruled over the vast Roman Empire, yet his greatest wisdom came not from debates or discussions, but from his time alone, writing his meditations in solitude. Sun Tzu, the legendary strategist, wrote The Art of War not in the company of men, but in the quiet of deep contemplation, where he could see the patterns of battle long before they unfolded. Even Leonardo da Vinci, a man whose mind was centuries ahead of his time, would retreat into solitude, spending hours, days, even weeks in deep thought, refining ideas that would change the course of history. They all understood one thing: a mind that is constantly surrounded by noise will never reach its true potential. The modern world has made solitude a rarity. It has trained men to fear boredom, to fill every empty moment with distractions, scrolling, notifications, conversations that mean nothing. But this is not the path of the strong. The strong do the opposite. They seek silence. They create space for thought. And in that space, they refine their ideas, sharpen their reasoning, and train their minds to operate on a level others cannot reach. This is why the greats always appeared different from ordinary men. They saw what others could not. They could think 5, 10, even 20 moves ahead because they had trained their minds in solitude. A man who cannot be alone cannot think, and a man who cannot think is easily controlled. But a man who has sharpened his mind in silence, he is dangerous. He sees beyond the surface. He understands human nature. He moves with precision while others stumble blindly, and that man is rare. So ask yourself, when was the last time you truly sat in silence? Not passively, not as a break, but with intention. To think, to strategize, to sharpen your mind like a blade against the stone of solitude? Most men will never do this. They will remain scattered, weak, and easily distracted. But the man who embraces solitude, who trains his mind in silence, will rise above them all. Because in a world where everyone is lost in noise, the man who can think clearly is king. Benefit 4. Solitude builds unbreakable self-reliance. A man who cannot stand alone is a man who will always be controlled. He will depend on the validation of others, rely on their presence for comfort, and fear the thought of facing life on his own. He will mistake companionship for strength, not realizing that true power is found in a man who does not need the world to hold him up. But the man who embraces solitude? He learns something that sets him apart from the weak. He learns to rely on himself. This is the foundation of all greatness. Look at history's strongest men, and you will find that each of them, at some point, walked alone. They did not become who they were by clinging to others, by needing approval, by seeking constant company. They became great because they stepped away from the crowd and built themselves. Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher, warned against becoming dependent on the world. He said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." This is not just about material wealth, it is about dependence. The more a man needs from the world, the weaker he becomes. But the man who needs little, who finds strength within himself, is truly free. Most men never learn this. They are afraid of silence, of solitude, of self-reliance, because it forces them to confront an uncomfortable truth. No one is coming to save them. Think about this. How many men go through life expecting someone else to provide them with purpose? They wait for the perfect mentor to guide them. They wait for society to tell them what to do. They wait for a relationship to give them meaning. And in this waiting, they waste years, sometimes their entire lives, never realizing that the power to stand on their own was always within them. But the man who chooses solitude sees the truth. He understands that there is no savior, no perfect moment, no external force that will come and lift him to greatness. He understands that if he does not build himself, no one will. If he does not create his own purpose, he will drift through life, following whatever path others lay before him. Solitude is where this realization happens. It is in the silence, in the moments when a man has nothing but himself, that he either breaks or becomes something unshakable. At first, self-reliance feels uncomfortable. When you stop depending on the world, you feel the weight of responsibility like never before. But this is a good thing. It is the test every great man must pass, the test of standing alone. The samurai understood this deeply. They lived by the philosophy of Bushido, the way of the warrior, which emphasized self-sufficiency above all else. A warrior who needed others to prop him up was weak, vulnerable, easily broken. But a warrior who could stand alone, who could survive without the approval or assistance of others, was truly strong. It is the same for you. The more time you spend in solitude, the more you realize how little you truly need. You do not need constant validation. You do not need distractions. You do not need approval. You begin to see that everything you once thought was necessary was merely a crutch. And as you remove those crutches, you stand taller. This is why the world does not want you to be alone. Society thrives on dependence. It wants you addicted to attention, to consumerism, to external validation. Because a man who needs these things is easy to control. But the man who has spent time alone, who has built his own mind, who has forged his own strength, he is ungovernable. Once you learn to rely on yourself, everything changes. Your confidence is no longer fragile. Your choices are your own. You do not seek permission to live the life you want. And most importantly, you are free. Most men will never reach this point. They will spend their lives leaning on others, never realizing that true power comes from within. But you are not most men. You are here because you sense something deeper. You understand that solitude is not a prison, but a forge. A place where the weak are broken and the strong are made. And the man who emerges from this forge, he is unstoppable. Benefit 5. Solitude ignites unstoppable discipline and self-control. A man without discipline is a slave to his impulses. He wakes up when he feels like it, works only when he's in the mood, and seeks comfort instead of progress. His days are ruled by distractions, by fleeting desires, by whatever feels good in the moment. He tells himself he will change, that he will start tomorrow, but tomorrow never comes. Because he is not in control of himself, his impulses are. But the man who embraces solitude does not have this weakness. He understands that solitude is not just a place of thought, it is a place of transformation. In the absence of distractions, of validation, of mindless entertainment, a man is left with only one thing, his will. And in that space, his true strength is tested. The Stoics believed that the highest form of power was self-mastery. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." In solitude, this lesson becomes clear. Because when you are alone, there is no one to push you forward, no one to hold you accountable, no one to motivate you, to discipline you, to tell you what must be done. It is just you. And in that moment, a man either rises or he collapses. This is why most men avoid solitude. Not because they fear being alone, but because they fear what solitude demands of them. It forces them to face their weaknesses. It removes all excuses. When no one is watching, there is no one to impress. When no one is there to judge, there is no need to pretend. And when there is nothing to distract them, they must confront the truth. Either they are disciplined or they are not. Most men fail this test. They say they will use solitude to improve, but instead, they waste it. They distract themselves with endless entertainment, with meaningless habits, with anything that numbs the discomfort of self-discipline. But the man who embraces solitude sees it as an opportunity. He uses it to build routines that sharpen his body, his mind, his soul. He wakes up with purpose, not because someone tells him to, but because he commands himself to. He works not because of deadlines or pressure, but because he understands that greatness is built in the silent hours when no one is watching. He masters his emotions, his thoughts, his desires, not because he has to, but because he chooses to. And this is what separates the strong from the weak. Discipline is not built in front of an audience. It is not built through motivation or fleeting inspiration. It is built in the moments of solitude, when a man is left with nothing but himself and the weight of his choices. The samurai of ancient Japan lived by this principle. They trained alone for hours, days, years, perfecting their strikes, sharpening their skills, disciplining their minds. Not because someone forced them to, but because they understood that self-discipline is the foundation of mastery. A warrior who needs an audience to train is not a warrior. A man who needs external pressure to be disciplined is not truly disciplined. But the man who can train, work, and build himself in complete solitude, he is dangerous. Because once a man learns to discipline himself in solitude, he is unshakable. His habits are not dependent on external pressure. His focus is not dictated by others. His actions are not driven by approval or validation. He is ruled by one thing and one thing only, his own will. And that kind of man is unstoppable. The weak will never reach this level. They will always need someone to remind them to stay on track. They will always rely on external forces to push them forward. And without those forces, they will crumble. But the man who has trained himself in solitude, who has built discipline not because he had to, but because he chose to, he will rise. Because a man who has mastered himself can master anything. Benefit 6. Solitude reveals your true purpose and makes you unbreakable. Most men wander through life without ever knowing why they are here. They chase money because they think it will fulfill them. They chase relationships because they think another person will give their life meaning. They chase status, approval, and fleeting pleasures, all in the desperate hope that something, anything, will make them feel complete. But nothing ever does. And so they keep running, lost in the noise of the world, drowning in distractions, never stopping long enough to ask themselves the one question that truly matters: why am I here? But the man who embraces solitude does not run. He steps away from the noise. He silences the outside world. And in that silence he listens, not to others, not to society, but to himself. And in that moment something powerful happens. The illusions fall away. The false desires, the meaningless pursuits, the shallow ambitions, they all crumble. And what remains is something real, something unshakable: purpose. This is what most men will never understand. Purpose is not found in the opinions of others. It is not given to you by society. It is not something you stumble upon by accident. Purpose is something that must be uncovered, something that already exists within you, but has been buried under years of noise, fear, and distraction. And the only way to find it is through solitude. Nietzsche wrote, "He who has a why to live can bear almost any how." A man with purpose cannot be broken. He cannot be swayed by the opinions of others. He does not need external validation because his path is his own. But most men will never find their purpose because they are too afraid to be alone with themselves. They are terrified of silence, of introspection, of truly looking within. Because deep down, they know the truth. If they strip away everything, if they sit alone with themselves, they might not like what they see. And that is the first battle. Because solitude does not just reveal purpose, it reveals everything. The weaknesses you've ignored, the fears you've buried, the lies you've told yourself. When a man is truly alone, there is no escape. He must face himself as he truly is. And that is why solitude is both a forge and a fire. A weak man, when faced with the truth of himself, will break. He will retreat back into the world, into the distractions, into the comfortable illusion that keeps him blind. But the strong man, the man who chooses to stay in the fire, he is reforged. He sees himself clearly. He sees his flaws, his failures, his wasted time. And instead of running, he uses this knowledge. He refines himself. He cuts away what is weak. He builds what is strong. And in doing so, he emerges from solitude as something few men ever become: whole. This is why every great thinker, warrior, and leader throughout history has understood the power of solitude. The Stoics spent hours in isolation, contemplating their existence, questioning their desires, ensuring that every action they took aligned with their true purpose. Buddha sat in solitude under the Bodhi tree, refusing to move until he found enlightenment. Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary samurai, spent years alone in the mountains, perfecting his skills, mastering his mind, and discovering the warrior's path. They all understood what modern men have forgotten. If you do not know yourself, you cannot master yourself. And if you cannot master yourself, you will never master life. Purpose is not something you wait for. It is not something that will reveal itself in the middle of your distractions. It is something you must seek, deliberately and relentlessly. And the only place it will ever be found is in the stillness of solitude. Most men will never take this path. They will spend their lives running from silence, running from their thoughts, running from themselves. And they will wake up one day, old and filled with regret, realizing too late that they never truly lived. But you are not most men. You are here because something inside you knows the truth. You feel it. You sense that there is more to life than what you have been told, that there is something greater, something deeper, waiting to be uncovered. And if you have the courage to step into solitude, to embrace it, to let it strip away everything false, then you will find what most men never will. You will find yourself. You will find your purpose. And once you do, nothing in this world will be able to stop you. Because a man who knows his purpose is unbreakable. Final thoughts. The man who walks alone walks the truest path. Most men will never understand the power of solitude. They will spend their lives avoiding it, drowning in noise, clinging to distractions, always seeking the company of others to escape the weight of their own thoughts. They will fear being alone because they do not realize what solitude truly is. Solitude is not loneliness. Solitude is not isolation. Solitude is not emptiness. Solitude is power. It is the forge where discipline is hardened, where self-reliance is built, where the mind is sharpened, and where true purpose is found. It is where a man learns that he does not need the world to define him, because he defines himself. Think about the men you admire, the legends, the warriors, the thinkers, the creators, the ones who shaped history. Were they men who spent their days seeking approval? Were they men who feared being alone? Or were they men who withdrew from the world to sharpen their minds, build their strength, and walk their own path? You already know the answer. The man who embraces solitude becomes something rare, a man who stands on his own, a man who does not need validation, who does not need distractions, who does not need permission to live the life he chooses. The world does not want you to be this man. It wants you dependent. It wants you weak. It wants you to fear being alone, because a man who cannot be alone is a man who can be controlled. But a man who masters solitude, he is dangerous. Because once you learn that you do not need the world loses all power over you. You are free. You are strong. You are untouchable. And that, wisdom seeker, is what makes solitude one of the greatest gifts a man can give himself. Walk alone. Find your strength. Become unbreakable. The world may not understand it, but you will. And that is all that matters.